The United States is giving Vladimir Putin $70 million per day for his oil. Isn't that fabulous? We're getting our oil from our enemies now. You think you've heard it all. So let's get into that in this video. Why are we spending $70 million a day for Russian oil? That is right, folks. $70 million a day from our enemy. Private companies in the United States spending $70 million a day. Think about the craziness of this. Joe Biden is running around trying to look like the tough guy. The big guy is hitting Russia with sanctions over Vladimir Putin's obscene invasion of Ukraine. They just went around and did some back-end deals with China to get around the sanctions. But at the same time, we pay Russia in the vicinity of $70 million per day for oil imports. During these past 7 or 8 days of Putin's criminal war against Ukraine, we've sent the same Putin during the same 7 days close to $500 million. What the hell is going on? What the hell is going on? On the one hand, Biden claims to be crippling Vlad with sanctions, while on the other hand, we're slipping him $70 million per day. Putin has cut a deal with China. He's not worried about the sanctions. I mean, you got to follow the tea leaves on this and look between the lines. He's not worried at all. Pete Buttigieg, Transportation Secretary, had a wonderful comment about the Keystone Pipeline. My God, Pete was asked about the Keystone Pipeline, and he stated, "We don't want permanent solutions to immediate short-term problems." What, Pete? We don't want permanent jobs, better economy, long-term energy independence? Like, say what you will about the last administration, we were energy independent. I know what the hell's going on here, why the Keystone Pipeline was cut down. Even the current energy secretary under the Biden administration stated the safest way for oil to travel is below ground, not on trucks, because people are dying every week transporting oil above ground in trucks. It's very dangerous business. How many jobs do we kill with the Keystone Pipeline? Special pipes that don't corrode. It's underground. The only thing you got to worry about is some farmer digging into the ground, but they all know where the pipes are. So here's some facts. Here's some facts, folks. Just the facts. Wind solar cannot power a modern economy right now. It sounds all warm and fuzzy, but the technology is not there. Even Germany just came out, the Green Party just came out and apologized for being too dependent on Russian oil. It finally hit them in the middle of the head. That's national news. Germany is now going to spend 2% or more on their defense budget. Like the last administration told them to do so, Germany laughed in their face, Merkel and her colleagues, and now they're doing what the last administration said to do. It would have been nice during the State of the Union if Joe Biden said, hey, we made some mistakes with Afghanistan, COVID-19, and we were energy independent under the last administration. We need to go back to that. That kind of talk would have won some points with the American people and me. So, when your enemies, China and Russia, say they are going to use fossil fuels, you have to use them as well. You can't be dependent on your enemies for resources and destroy the U.S. economy because you want to be warm and fuzzy. I'm all in for green. It's climate, it's green, global warming, now it's climate change. I'm all in for green. The U.S. has done more for climate change than any country in the world. We put $1 billion, $1 billion into the climate fund when everyone else put nothing. It's voluntary, folks. The other countries, it's voluntary. They put nothing in. We have clean coal, unlike China. Our smokestacks omit vapor. We have scrubbers on our smokestacks, folks. So you should not get so upset about coal. We use clean coal. China uses dirty coal. So we've done more for climate change than any country in the world. Putin controlled the oil in Europe and U.S. Dependent on Russia and other countries for its oil. This emboldened Putin. You know, with all the power Putin has over the Western world, Biden could have still stopped it by just keeping Ukraine neutral for the moment it is, and not allowing, Ukraine into NATO. You know, we keep poking the Russian bear. I'm not a fan of Putin, but he is the second biggest nuclear power, and we have to respect and work with him. Enough is enough. We're the greatest country in the world, and we need to act like it. We are not leading right now, and it's absolutely embarrassing because we got lobbyists and special interests double dipping on the energy independence and screwing over America. What did Roosevelt say? Speak softly with a big stick. So with a guy like Putin, you got to stroke his ego. He's a smart, you're creative, you're strategic, like the last administration did. And then behind the scenes, they put the most toughest sanctions on him ever at that time. You know, you don't call this guy crazy things when he's the second biggest nuclear power in the world. He's listening. You gotta speak softly with a big stick. In 2021, the U.S. imported an average of 209,000 barrels per day of crude oil and 500,000 of other petroleum products from Russia. U.S. imports of crude oil averaged 6.1 million barrels per day in 2021 and accounted for about 40% of crude processed by U.S. refineries. 61% of imports were from Canada, 10% from Mexico, 6% from Saudi Arabia, 3% from Russia. 2021 crude imports from Russia averaged 0.2 million barrels per day, the highest level in many years, but still, you know, a small share of the imports in total crude oil processed by U.S. refineries. U.S. refineries processed 15.1 million barrels per day of crude oil in 2021. 80% of the imports of Russia gasoline and gasoline blending components are into the East Coast, 15% into Puerto Rico, and the balance goes to the West Coast. So on the West Coast, Russia crude is imported to supply refineries in Hawaii, California, Washington, and Alaska. In 2021, supply of Russian crude oil to refineries in California and Washington state increased substantially versus 2019, helping to offset lower volumes of the light sweet crude imports into California from other countries, notably Nigeria and lower volumes of the U.S. And others was shipped by rail to Washington. So in addition to crude oil, the U.S. imports other petroleum products from Russia, primarily unfinished oils that U.S. refineries further process into gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, as well as gasoline blends, stocks of petroleum diesel. So in 2021, imports of petroleum products other than crude oil averaged 500,000 barrels per day, bringing the total petroleum imports from Russia to 709,000 barrels per day. 709,000 barrels per day from Russia. And, last check, oil's over $108, $10 a barrel. And one of the reasons oil is so high is the war in Ukraine, right now. So Mr. Putin is making more money on his oil by waging a war with a neighbor. So how great is that, folks? How great is that? What a sweet racket this guy set up. You know, he set up Europe to be dependent on him, which set him up to invade Ukraine. What are they going to do? He controls all the oil over there. And the reality is, brought to you directly from Joe Biden, for it is Biden who entered office, immediately killed off an American oil pipeline, and then turned around and approved Putin's pipeline, NORAD Stream 2. Unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. It is Biden who killed the energy independence we enjoyed under the last administration. Say what you will about Trump. We were energy independent. He called out the EU to pay their fair share, and he called out China. But among other things, canceling lucrative oil leases, which he did. And for what? Look around. We're still using the same amount of oil. The only difference is that we're paying a hell of a lot more to import it. We don't need to do that. And we're helping to fund Putin's criminal invasion of a sovereign, nation. That was no threat to Russia or anyone else right now. So, we're spending this monster $70 million per day when we don't have to do it, folks. All we have to do is drill, dig, frack here at home. Here at home. How can Biden and the Democrats scream bloody murder about the war in Ukraine when it is their absurd environmental policies that made the war possible? We set the stage for Putin. We're dependent on his oil. Europe's dependent on his oil. What do you think he's going to do? He's like, I'm going to invade. They're not going to do anything. And it's not just America. It's also those, there's idiots on both sides, but the left-wing idiots in the European Union who are closing operational nuclear power plants only to turn around and send billions to Putin for his oil, natural gas, and coal. Unbelievable. They're responsible for the deaths of people in Ukraine. If the Western world would simply tap its own energy resources, and not only would Putin be too broke to wage an unjust war, he would have, no leverage over West, and, we wouldn't have to rely on this tyrant to keep the lights on. So just keep all that in mind as slow Joes running around acting tough with Putin, like he said in his interviews. The truth is that given a choice between developing our own resources and enriching a tyrant to the tune of $70 million per day, $500 million, Biden chose to enrich a tyrant. Why did he do that is the question. We all know what happened in 2014. The government was overthrown. The duly elected government in Ukraine elected a pro-Russian government, the people, and we came in there and put in our own puppet, and we've been controlling Ukraine since 2014. So we have interest over there too, saying, the people are suffering in Ukraine even before this war. Are they going to suffer more under Putin? That's debatable. Most likely, yes. But Ukraine, there's interest on the Western and there's interest in Eastern Europe. But, this guy said, listen, I won't go into Ukraine. Don't put missiles in Ukraine. Don't let them in NATO. None of this would have happened. Even with the way he's got the power play, with all the oil coming in, Europe depended on him. We're dependent on him a little bit. He still probably wouldn't have invaded. But the State Department came back and said, no, we're not going to agree to that. And now he controls the oil. What's he going to do? NATO's been marching on his border. And I just think you have to be careful with the guy who has the second largest reserves of nuclear weapons in the world that demands some respect. He's a thug. He's a tyrant. They're all over the world. But we got idiots right now running this administration. It's absolutely absurd. Wind and power is not there. It's not going to power a modern economy, ladies and gentlemen. That's why when our competitors heard that we were going to do that, they just laughed, and China said, we're going to build more coal plants. If your enemies are doing it, you have to do it at the very least. It doesn't work. And there's a lot of problems. And guess who's going to sell us all our solar panels? China. And there's environmental issues with solar panels. You have, let's say, 100,000 solar panels somewhere. You know what that does to the animal life? You know what that does to the environment? It's not completely safe. There's issues with it. And the technology is not there yet for solar panels and wind. We have to run and build nuclear plants and natural gas and get going. It's a tragedy what's going on in Ukraine. But you look at these numbers. Let me leave you with one number. When we talk about, we're worried about Ukraine's border, and we have drugs, human trafficking coming across our border. 65 countries are coming across our border. We don't know what's going on. We're all worried about Ukraine's border. And it's terrible. There's over 1,000 Ukrainians. These poor people have died. But take fentanyl. Fentanyl's coming into our border right now. 100,000 Americans, 100,000 Americans died last year of fentanyl overdose. Guess what? Let me give you a stat. Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined, those wars don't even equal the amount of people that died of fentanyl coming in. That stuff coming in from our southern border. That's terrible. And how does Ukraine affect us? Russia has the economy the size of Texas. Okay, the Red Army is not going to march across Europe and come to the United States. They don't want to take over the United States. But I'll tell you who does. I'll tell you who does. China. You know, their economy, their military is a greater threat to the United States of America than Russia. And it is known fact that China wants to overtake America. They want to overtake America, not Russia. You know, Russia has a ridiculously small economy. They got a lot of issues. They don't have the power of China. China is the one stealing our intellectual property and doing more cyber attacks. They got they're way ahead of the game compared to Russia. And we're all looking at the bear over here in Russia as China continues to steal our intellectual property and get into our institutions and spy. Yes, Russia's spying, but China is way ahead of Russia, and they want to implement, and people in this country want to implement their social credit system. So this is terrible what's going on in Ukraine, but the fact is, with some smart leadership, it could have been avoided. And we're just enriching Putin. He's getting his oil from us. You know, we're giving him money for oil. He's got Europe locked down. He's like, hey, I go to Ukraine and no one's going to stop me. And that's what's going on. Let me tell you this. I got friends. I'm calling over there. He's decimating that place. And it's going to be his. What he's going to do with it, we'll see. He doesn't have the funds to run two countries like that. But it's not pretty. And we don't need to buy our oil and embolden our enemies. We can do it right here. Wind and solar is a great idea, and turbines and whatever, but the technology is not there. You know, 80% of our economy is dependent on fossil fuels to make it run. The most powerful economy in the world, and it's being destroyed. And this doesn't need to happen. Take care.